This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone since our parents had gone out for a Halloween party. They had tasked us with handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. This bummed my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends ourselves. Our parents told us that we were too old to still be trick-or-treating and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and hang out there. My friends declined my invitation to come over because they still wanted to go out trick-or-treating, so that left me alone with my brother handing out candy. A lot of people stopped by our house, and by 10 o'clock, almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided that we'd eat the rest. We were sitting on the couch watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, when there was a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch, wondering who in the hell could be knocking on our door this late. I assumed that it was just some late-night trick-or-treaters. Even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light and Halloween decorations off, which should have been a dead giveaway that we were out of candy or that we weren't home, so I assumed it was my parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw a suspicious man standing at our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face that I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There was no way this guy was a trick-or-treater, because he wasn't wearing a costume and was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in his front pockets of his hoodie, and he looked very thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There was no way in hell I was going to open that door. Still looking through the peephole, I watched as he knocked on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open the door, and he was shaking a bit. It wasn't cold outside, definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling. He was giving me a bad vibe, and I wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. "We were out of candy," I shouted to him. I watched as a smile spread across his face. It wasn't a friendly one either. "Are you alone in there?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a grumble and said, "Sounds like you're not alone in there." I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I began to wonder if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could. "Get away from this house, or I'll call the police," I shouted. His smile faded, and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had the look of fury plastered on his face. Fortunately, he left without trying to break in, probably because he knew I wasn't messing around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole until I saw him completely get off our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and decided not to call the cops. My brother and I were a little bit paranoid after this and watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about the man since he hadn't really tried to harm us. Now when I think back to this, I wish we would have called the police, because maybe we could have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day, we found out that an elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor had found her lying on her front porch, covered in blood. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who had done it, and we told the police what we knew. They couldn't do much from the information we had given them, since we hadn't seen many details of his face. They went on to hunt for the man, but never caught him. I blame myself for that poor old lady's murder, because I could have prevented it from happening just by calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of all is that the fact he didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her house had been left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since her door was wide open. This means that he just wanted to kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry. He only had the urge to murder. With the most recent Mortal Kombat game, including Jason Voorhees, it got me recently thinking about this one encounter I had with someone on Halloween when I was 14 years old. I was around that time in my life where most kids my age would stop trick-or-treating, either because they thought it was lame or because their parents had told them to stop. Me and my family had a similar conversation, and in the end, we decided that this trick-or-treat would be the final one. So, when October 31st came, my dad helped me paint my face to look like a zombie. I figured that this costume should be simple, yet something I liked. So a zombie it was. I grabbed an empty pillowcase and headed out, with my parents telling me to be back by 11ish. Before you ask, yes, I was going trick-or-treating by myself. I was able to convince my parents that I needed to get as much candy as I could, seeing as how I wouldn't be able to do this again next year. So off I went, running from house to house, shoving candy in my pillowcase as fast as I could. So by the time it got dark, my pillowcase was about 3/4 filled, and I had no intent of slowing down. As I'm about to walk into the new neighborhood, a black van pulls up on the curve that was about a few feet away from me. The door opens, and out of the darkness comes some guy in a hockey mask and a tattered jacket, wielding a machete. He turns his head towards me, probably trying to creep me out. "Nice Jason costume," I say, trying to be friendly as I begin to walk past him. "Thanks, zombie. You want some candy? I've got bags of them." He says that as he pulls out these little white sacks of candy. So me, being the idiot 14-year-old I was, opened the pillowcase and let him plop 2 or 3 sacks into it. "Make sure you eat them real soon, you'll love them," he snickered, which really sent a chill down my spine. He left as quickly as he came, but I just shrugged it off, and I needed to finish trick-or-treating. I continued down the road again, going from house to house for candy. After about the 3rd or 4th house, I noticed something odd. It was the same black van from before. After every house I went to, the van would get closer and closer. At around what I could only guess was about 10:30, I headed home with my candy sack almost bursting. As I walked, the area behind me illuminated, and I turned around, expecting to see the car that would soon pass me. It was the van, and in the driver's seat was the same Jason Voorhees who gave me the candy. My heart stopped, and I broke into a mad dash back to my house. The van was easily keeping up with me. I was lucky to be able to lose him by running into the woods near my house. I exited the woods that led to the side of my house and looked for a fake rock that held the spare key to our house. After I got in, I put my candy on the kitchen table and somehow found a way to go to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, my parents were sitting at the kitchen table digging around through my bags of candy that Jason had given me. They started asking me where and who I got the bags from, which started to freak me out. I would later learn that the bags of candy were nothing more than just bags of prescription drugs. There were a ton of sleeping pills in them, and I finally understood his intentions. He was going to follow me until I fell asleep, then do God only knows what with me after he got me into the van. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure whether or not that machete he had was fake or not. The police came up empty-handed, so I guess I'll never know his fate. I was around 11 years old, and I was with my sister and her friends. We were all girls. They were all around 16 and were taking me trick-or-treating. We were going door to door to get candy and playing with silly string. I kept getting this weird feeling like I was looking behind me constantly, and I had no clue why. Around 9:30 p.m., I turned around quickly, and there was a guy dressed up as a clown about 2 yards behind us. I wasn't really scared about this because I like clowns, and since this was the first time I saw him, I figured that he was just trick-or-treating. But he followed us for another hour, never getting candy and waiting for us at each house we stopped at. At this point, I was stressed and told my sister about the clown. She decided that we would try to go a completely different route and see if he would still follow us. So we all crossed the street, and once again, he followed us. My sister absolutely hates clowns and was freaked out, so she called our dad to come pick us up. We continued walking for around 30 minutes until our dad called us, saying where he was parked. We all started walking fast toward the direction of my dad's car, but that's when the clown ran in front of us and tried to corner us. I think he knew that we were trying to leave. My sister and her friends were freaking out, and me being a naive, outspoken kid, I yelled at the clown to leave us alone. I remember that he tilted his head to the side when I said that, kind of like a confused dog. I grabbed my sister's silly string and told the clown that if he didn't leave us alone, I'd ruin his outfit with the silly string. Again, I was a naive kid. I actually thought that he would be scared of silly string. This clown didn't back off. So I stringed him all over his mask and his costume. While I did this, my sister called our dad again, telling him to hurry and where we were. The clown struggled to get the silly string off his mask so he could see, but we were already running. My dad came around the corner and we all rushed inside the car. The clown caught up with us, trying to open the car door, but it was locked. As my dad hit the gas, the clown slammed his hands in the back window. I remember watching him out the back window, trying to chase the car, but failing. I never figured out what was up with that clown, but there were other reports of a clown with the same description chasing kids in the area. Halloween has unfortunately never been a big deal out here in Scotland, and that's always bummed me out because I love Halloween. But after this year, I think I'll be happy never celebrating it again. My street and the next street over have a lot of young kids who go out trick-or-treating, so while I was out shopping all day with my mom, I decided to pick up some sweets in case anyone came to the door. I had plans to go to the movies and see a Ouija with my boyfriend, so when I got home, I was getting myself ready to go out, and my mom was busy putting the shopping stuff away. So when the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who had to answer it. There were children from our street and the next one over, and also some I couldn't recognize, as well as an adult at the end of the path. I guessed either their father or their older brother by their size. And they were all dressed in black, and had some sort of mask covering their face. But it wasn't anything I recognized from a movie or anything. Anyway, they told me their jokes, and I gave them their treats, and they made their way back down the path and on to the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed that the guy with the kids was still standing at the end of my path. He hadn't noticed, and he wasn't watching the children either. He was looking right at me, and my skin started to crawl when I realized that he was just staring at me. I backed slowly into the house and watched him as he raised his hand and waved very slowly at me. And I was about to call out to him when my mom came to the door to make sure I was alright, and he took off in the opposite way of the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and he left as soon as he realized that I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaked out and told my boyfriend all about it when he came to the house to pick me up, but I quickly forgot all about it when we were watching the movie. When I finally got home, it was getting really late, and trick-or-treating was well and truly over around here. When I got inside, my mom was just getting ready to take the dogs out for a walk so that they could do their last-minute business, and they would meet my dad on his way home from work. So, I was going to be home alone. After my horrible encounter posted on here, I don't really like being home alone, but it's worse on Halloween, and it always has been. Anyway, I was home alone and grabbed some snacks and went up to my bedroom and onto my computer so that I could do some writing, scroll through Tumblr, and listen to music. After the first creepy encounter with the guys coming into my house and into my backyard, my dad bought a motion-censored light and attached it to the wall of our house right outside the window. Normally, it will go off whenever a cat walks along our fence, but it will usually go off after a couple of minutes. I always know when the light comes on because it lights up my whole room given where it's placed, and while I was sitting on my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first, but I knew it would go off soon. But 5 minutes passed and it still hadn't gone off, so I opened my blinds to have a look outside and see what was going on. My stomach cringed when I looked out the window and saw the creeps from hours before sitting on the fence, waving at the window to keep the light on. His waving slowed down suddenly when he spotted me, and it was all seriously creepy again, and I didn't know what to do. I just got flashbacks from before. Luckily, I heard the front door open and my parents coming into the house with the dogs. So I rushed down the stairs and started screaming at them about the guys on the fence. My dad didn't question me. He just took the dogs and rushed through the house, through the back door, and ran outside, and then heard him shouting, "Get out of here, you creep! I'm gonna call the police!" My dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to call the police because I didn't want to relive the whole thing again. I just wanted to go to sleep and forget all about that whole night.